This one here, shock horror, is completely unbranded with no line weight designation on it whatsoever. One of my favourite rods. I put this in people's hands and stick any fly line on it and they seem to cast it. Every time someone picks up a rod, the first thing they do is they read it. 7 weight, okay. Part of this tour I've been doing with Simon and with J.M. Gillies is visiting retailers, talking about fly lines, talking about rods, and listening to the retailers and the shops about people's reaction to various rods, especially rods from the Sage lineup. And generally the reaction to the Sage 1 has been, it's too stiff. It doesn't have enough feel. And I said to the retailers, well, why don't you upline it? Why don't you put a 6 weight line on a 5 weight rod and see what happens then to your customer? See what they do then. They won't do it. They wouldn't dream of putting a 6 weight line on a 5 weight rod. Not the shop owners, but the customers, the fly casters. And I simply don't understand why. Because after all, a rod, and Max Garth, that notorious Max Garth, whom I used to argue with endlessly on various chat sites, actually got it right. He said a carbon fibre rod is just a tube of graphite. It doesn't know what weight it is. It's us who are saying, it needs to be such and such a weight. And among this group of however many people are, I can guarantee that everyone here has their own particular casting style, and we all fish mostly different water using different flies. So we should be prepared to experiment with rod and line combinations in order to find better combinations to fish those waters. So a 5 weight Rio Gold on a 5 weight 1 may very well match one person's style. They may be a caster with a fairly short stroke, but the next person to pick up the same rod and line combination might have a longer stroke and might naturally use a wider arc. Without the weight of a bit more line out there to bend the tip of the rod to get it moving in a straight line, the path of the tip of the rod is going to be domed. And they're going to throw a wide open and fairly ineffective loop. And they're not going to feel the tip of the rod working. Why not stick a 6 weight line on it? I have a great mate who lives up in central Victoria. No names. He loves his Sage TCRs. Very fast, stiff rods in their day. And I went and visited him, and we were fishing together, and he had a brand new 8 TCR at the time, and he had a 10 weight line on it. I said, why do you put a 10 weight line on it? He said, because I like it like that. Pretty good answer to me. It made that rod work for him. For my lineup of rods I've got here today, this is the first rod. It's a completely unbranded rod. I don't know what weight it is. It was given to me when I visited the Sage factory in 2012. I have no idea what Jerry Seam thought it was going to be. I was on my way to Mexico to fish with bonefish, and he said, here, have a fish with this. So I assumed it was an 8 weight. I fished 10 weight lines on it, I fished 6 weight lines on it. It seems to work beautifully with all of them. And it seems to me to be, to work particularly well because I'm not influenced by reading on here that it's an 8. And therefore I've got to put an 8 weight line on it. The other rods I have here, this is my new, not the Corellas, this is my new favourite trout fishing rod. I've just been in New Zealand, spent a couple of weeks mostly fishing with this rod. It's a method, it's a 4 weight method. At the moment I've got a 6 weight line on it. Makes it a much slower rod, a beautiful, easy casting rod to use. I found the 4 method on a bigger river on a windy day with a 4 weight line just didn't work, but on a small stream with a 4 weight line on and small dry flies, it was fine. On a bigger river with 2 nymphs and a strike indicator, I can still throw those. There's a crack in the concrete there. I can still throw those on this rod very comfortably with a 6-weight line and a 4-weight rod. A couple of other rods here I wanted to throw. The first of them, pull those lines out of there. Now I know how you feel, Gauzy. I think that's coming out of there. Okay, this is a 12-weight rod. To make it a little easier for myself today. Oh, I picked up here. Someone's discarded leader. No, it's the leader off this one. To make it a little easier for myself today, I put a 5-weight line on it. What's that make it? An underlined 12-weight or a very stiff 5-weight? What do you reckon? You don't want to, one or the other's right. They're both right. For me, I like to think of it as a very, very stiff 5-weight. Because it hardly bends, it's very easy to throw very tight loops with it. Seems to cast fine to me. That's a 12-weight rod with a 5-weight line. On the other extreme here, and this is a rod you should all have a cast with, is a Reddington butter stick fiberglass rod. Bends a bit. And on here I've got a 10-weight line. Pull a bit more line off. You've got to be very smooth with this rod. It's a very long stroke. That also works. Very sloppy old 5-weight fiberglass rod with a 10-weight saltwater line on it. So what's right and what's wrong? I think that what's wrong is to have a closed mind to line weights on particular rods. I think what's right is that when you have your club casting days, to go and grab as many different lines and reels as you can amongst the group who's there and try them on your favourite rod. By doing things like this, we learn things. We learn about our casting stroke. We learn about adjusting and adapting our casting stroke. We might discover that our favourite rod actually works a lot nicer with a line weight up or down. My recent trip to New Zealand, I was fishing the Ariti River with a very good friend of mine, Rod Van Beek. And we were about a kilometre from the car, and the wind started to come up. A lot of big fish lying stiff in the river behind the rocks, not moving. Some fish tucked in behind the willows, with just a scattering of willow grubs coming down. But Beaky was interested in these big fish tucked in behind the rocks. He had a 5-weight VPX, VXP, yeah. 2 beadhead nymphs and a big strike indicator. And the wind came up. He had no chance. Very good caster. He's a CCI. Very good caster. No chance. The long cast required in that clean water. So I said to Pete, go back to the car. There's a 5-weight method there. And if you grab such and such a reel, it's got a 7-weight line on it. Bring that back and fish it. So we did. We were only about a kilometre from the car. We were on a long walk that day in the lower Ariti. He came back and said, this is a fantastic combination, but this fly line looks like a piece of washing line or tow rope. He grabbed the wrong reel, and the line he had on it was a sage bass line, 230 grain, which is, 8, 9 weight on a 5-weight rod. It was absolutely perfect for the conditions. The wind came up, it could turn over long leaders, big flies, or 2 heavy nymphs, and a big fluffy strike indicator easily on a 5-weight with that particular line. So my talk is just really to encourage you to try different lines on whatever rod you have, and if you decide you want to buy a new 5-weight or 6-weight, You think it's too stiff? Try it with a line heavier. If you want a nice new 5-weight, perhaps look at a 4-weight and upline it. Be adaptable, be changeable, learn to adjust your stroke to deal with the extra bend in the rod. You'll become a better caster for it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.